I think our reputation will be affected if we don't manage this particular risk. But they do not know how to calculate what is the impact that it may have. So sometimes you may want to use the non-financial parameters. So non-financial parameters at tier 3, no issue. Tier 3 you can use financial and non-financial. But once you move up to tier 2, tier 1, we need to convert everything into financial parameters. Why? Because otherwise you cannot consolidate the risk upwards towards tier 1. So this is how we will calculate. Then of course, we work with the CEO, CFO to confirm the risk parameters, and ultimately the board of directors need to confirm that this is the risk parameters they want to use, because these parameters are translated from the appetite of the board has, on that particular risk. If the appetite is low, a lot of risk will be rated as high. If the appetite is very high, then the risk will not be extreme high, it may be probably at the medium level. So it's just in terms of where your risk, and then you consolidate the risk itself. So once the risk has been identified, it has been measured, very important that we start preparing action plan. Yeah? And action plans are important. Why? Because if the risk you have identified, kalau kita tak ambil tindakan untuk mengatasi risiko itu, then we will be exposed to that particular risk. So we need to make sure that we take action to deal with the risk. So that's where the action plan comes in. Macam kita pergi jumpa doktor. You go and see a doctor, doctor say, nampaknya dalam jari kamu ni, ibu jari kamu ni ada cancer cells. Very high concentration of cancer cells. So now kita nak buat treatment. Yeah? So as part of the action plan, kita kena buat treatment. So the treatment could be few things. It could be minimize, accept, transfer, or what. So basically here, the doctor will say, hey, this one looks like, the concentration is very high. We need to basically minimize the risk. So how to minimize the risk? We cut off your thumb so that the cancer doesn't spread out throughout the body. So that's one way. Alright? Similarly, in running a business, there could be a small division which make a lot of losses for you. Alright? Assuming you don't have the CSR activity, that you need to manage that, then you will decide whether should I keep on or should I close it up. Alright? It's like, for example, when Tan Sri Baki was made the CEO of Sime Darby. Alright? So Sime Darby did very well prior to that. And then suddenly one day they woke up, the board decided, that the management decided that they need to go into oil and gas industry. So they went into oil and gas industry, they made losses of $1 billion in that particular year. They had a big project in Qatar, they did not know how to run it, they made a loss. Alright? So that year, the profit went down by 1B, in Sime Darby. Then Tan Sri Baki was appointed as a CEO of Sime Darby. So when Tan Sri Baki went in, the first thing he looked at was, he has got all this business division, the plantation division doing very well. Yeah? The trading division doing very well, the automotive division doing very well, all other businesses doing well, property development doing well. Oil and gas is the only one leading them. So what did he do? He said, this is an industry that we don't have the people. We don't have the right people. This industry, you need big money, oil and gas. We don't have the right people. We have to rely on the customers. We have to rely on the suppliers. They're all basically taking us for a ride. Why should we be in this business? What he did, he cut off the thing. He sold it off immediately. Yeah? And this was in the first few weeks. It was that. So the decision he took was to terminate, avoid. Because couldn't minimize the risk already, couldn't restructure the thing, so terminate the thing. So similarly, in going to see the doctor say, hey, we need to terminate the thing. So you basically avoid the risk. Or the doctor may say that, look here, this risk, you are already 90 years old. Why do you want to go through the whole process of chemotherapy and all this thing? Very painful. Why not you just live another 2 more years and then say goodbye to life? What is the doctor telling you? Accept the risk and do nothing. So in risk management, when we come up with action plans, we also have the options of what to do. Yeah, so we can either minimize the risk by mitigation the risk, or mitigation. We can accept the risk and do nothing. We can avoid the risk by cutting off that particular operation or stop the operation, or we can transfer. Transfer means macam katakan if there's a risk of fire, we transfer the risk to the insurer. So we insure the building, so the insurer now takes the risk, and they will then transfer the risk to the reinsurers. So it's a decision that we need to take. And that's why a lot of time people talk about risk management. The word we use is always risk management, bukan risk mitigation. Alright, all risk cannot be mitigated one, because the idea is for us to manage the risk within our appetite, not to mitigate all risk. Because if you mitigate every risk, then you won't be in the business. Because in business, you need to take risk, and you take a calculated risk. Alright, and the level of risk that you take. So the risk taking is there, but to manage that particular risk, you have 4 choices. You either accept the risk and do nothing, you transfer, you avoid, or you minimize. Alright? Another way to look at whether to accept the risk or not. Say for example, you have petty cash in your estates. Alright? Petty cash in the estate is 2,000. So every day the clerk puts the $2,000 in a small box, lock the box, put it into a drawer, lock the drawer, and then next day open the drawer and do a cash count. Alright? So many controls you have. But there is still a risk that the cash may disappear. So what do? Alright? You say, oh, there's still a risk. So let's appoint 2 security guards 24 hours looking at the drawer. Nobody steals. But you find that the cost of security guard itself is only 5,000. Those kind of risks, with the current controls that we have, where you already lock the thing, lock in the drawer, already doing a petty cash count, do you think we need to say that we accept the risk, or do you think that we need to do more? Yeah, so we'll say, cukup lah, the internal controls are cukup. Don't need to go and minimize the risk further. To minimize the risk, you're going to incur more costs. So there will be time where you say that this risk is at the right level, alright, we accept the risk. Alright, or if you think it's not at the right level, you want to take action, then you will say, okay, we minimize the thing, or we avoid. Or you say we transfer. Transfer can only be done in some circumstances, like when you insure. You cannot transfer, say, oh, this finance is the transfer for the HR. Cannot. Internally cannot transfer. It must transfer out of the organization. So the risk cannot be sitting within the organization. Then we look at the treatment options. We look, the treatment selection, then we take it to the risk management committee at the board level, at the management level, and then we come up with detailed action plans. We prioritize the action plans with start date, end date, and what is going to cause us to implement the thing, and then we present to the board to say these are the top 5 risks and these are the action plans. We have agreed with management and we want to drive this particular action plan. Board agrees, then you go and drive the action plans to address that particular risk. Depending on the decision that you take, whether you minimize, accept, transfer, or avoid that particular risk. So normally 4 decisions that you need to take. So this is the next report which goes to the board. That means once we have identified the bubble chart, from the bubble chart, the next report, okay, what are we going to do with each of these risk areas? First decision, we identify the risk owner and co-owner. And then we basically update the root causes and all. And the risk owner and co-owner, who identifies? The CEO himself identifies the risk owner and co-owner. And the risk owner that we identify, we must make sure that the risk owner is senior enough to drive that particular risk. Alright, like for example, top 5 risks, the top 2 risks, the CEO himself must become the risk owner, because it's critical risk. And then the CFO, and then the heads of department, the deputy CEO, and so on and so on. Alright? And when you identify the risk, say katakan in the mills, we have 5 mills. Yeah? So the risk will be quite common in all the 5 mills. 95% of the risk will be common because it's the same mill. You run, maybe the size may be different, location may be different. There may be 5 or 10% of the risk which may be different because of the location there, or maybe because the size of the thing. So when you address the action plan, the action plan for the risk in the mills, we don't get each individual mills to do it. We get a think tank group to come along, sit down, we appoint one risk owner, maybe the most senior guy within the mills, and then we prepare the action plan. And once the action plans are done, we then send it to the individual mills for implementation. So then you find it is very structured, easy, then you want to monitor puts down, because then you look at whether everything has been done. Because sometimes you find that the action plan, kalau ramai banyak sangat action plan, then it becomes a fulfilling exercise. We don't want a fulfilling exercise. We want to take action on the right risk and we want to drive it from that particular angle. Then moving on from there, we talk about avoid, retain, modify, and share. We talk about the existing profile, and once the action plans are done. Just to give you an example of S.B. Setia. So S.B. Setia was a role model as a property developer, way back in 1990s. They have diversified into Asia, Australia, Europe. They are now also in the UK and so on. So, as a property developer, you will have many risk areas. And not only you, but all the other property developer will also have similar risk areas. So as we said here, the risk management team got together and they say yes, every time there's a cycle of maybe 10 to 12 years when the property prices goes up and then the property prices comes down, when you have recession and all these things. And then property prices goes up and then come down again. So they felt that when the property prices start coming down or when the demand reduces because of the economic environment or if there is a crisis in the economy or whether globally there's a financial crisis or whatever, all property developers will be affected. So they felt that yes, if everybody is affected, how can we be better than the other property developer? Because people still will need to buy houses, but they will probably buy less. And if the less, how do I attract them to my project? So SB Satir analyzed the thing. They came up with this idea. They say that in their property development that they do, they look at the warranty claims. And they found out that the warranty claims normally come in the first 1 month, a lot. Second month reduces within the first 6 months. After that, very few warranty claims come because they have a good quality of product. So since they say they have a good quality of product, why do I give 1 year warranty? I give 3 years warranty. Because after 1 year, number of people to come back will be very slim. Alright, and they calculated the amount. So they say that you during economic crisis, people will now have money. So they went with this concept called the 595. You pay 5% upfront, book your unit, and even then you don't have money, they arrange for you an overdraft with the bank. Balance 95%, you pay at the time you collect your key. Because as we said here, they can get bank loans, whereas individuals may have difficulties. Alright? And how do they make sure that by the time the key is collected, you have the loan and you have the money? So what they do is by phase. Phase 1, they price the thing 100,000. A lot of people come by. Phase 2, they same house, same thing, next door, they price it at 130,000. So now the market value has gone up. To make sure that at the end, at the time they want to give you the key, the bank is willing to give you a loan. Why? Because yours is 100,000 only. Whereas the market value now has gone up to 130. So they have kind of inflated the thing. So people say, 5% je nak bayar. Belilah rumah, no problem sir. 5% only. And you don't need to worry. You worry 2-3 years down the line to get the loan and to pay the remaining 95%. So if you have this opportunity, where will you go and buy the house? So when the financial crisis came, SB Satir had no issue. They were still selling and still making a lot of money because they came up with these two concepts. 36 months warranty plus the 595 model. So we cannot say that if there's a financial crisis, we all be affected, we cannot manage the risk. It's an external risk. This was external risk, financial crisis. But despite being an external risk, they are still able to manage it because they were well prepared and they thought about all these things and they thought about all this. Yeah? Of course, eventually other property developers also started to introduce this. Then of course Bank Negara clamped down on the 595 because they found that 595, it creates inflation. People buy, then 3 years later they sell, then they buy the next one, then they buy, and so it creates inflation, and you find that the prices start shooting up very, very fast. So Bank Negara clamped down on this. Yeah, but you find this concept of 595 overseas like UK, Australia and all. You pay 20%, then the balance 80% you only pay at the time you collect the key. Whereas Malaysia is only still, kita kena bayar all progress payment. You pay for the progress payment, your installments semua dah start, tapi rumah tak siap lagi. Yeah, so how? So there's always a challenge. Whereas overseas you find UK and all this different concept that they use. So they make the property developer complete the project, then only you collect the balance of the money. Otherwise, there's no money. So these are the concept of how you manage your risk. There are ways of how to manage the risk and so on. So then we go on to risk action implementation monitoring. So once the action plan dah siap, kita dah siap action plan, kita ada start date, end date, lepas tu kita kena memastikan supaya action plan tu semua they are being implemented. Because you have a risk, the risk has got action plan, tapi action plan tak implement, also no use. So kita kena memastikan action plan itu semua, we are addressing the action plan. So you start with the action plans are completed on time, not completed, whether the cost has been incurred, whether they need to revise the action plan. So risk management department, this is one of their role. They need to check whether the action plans are completed. Yeah, because if you ask management always say, everything dah complete. But when you check, only 50% completed. So somebody needs to verify this, for the board, so that the board is aware that for each of the risks, what is the status of the action plan? Is it 50% completed, 60% completed, and so on. So they drive it from there. And then once it's done, you then embed it into your day-to-day processes. So like katakan, the investments we talked about earlier this morning. So what we did was we implemented action plan, we embedded action plan into their investment SOP. So when they look at the investments, they go through the SOP, automatically the risk that they have identified, automatically the risk is being managed by the internal control system that they have implemented. So that's where you get it embedded. So then once that is done, then finally you prepare what you call key risk indicators, KRI. So key risk indicators are for the top 10, top 15 risks, is to give you an early warning system. So that if the risk is going to crystallize, you know that you need to do something more. If you have not done enough, do something more before the risk crystallizes. So it gives you an early warning. So you set key risk indicators, for the various risks that you have, and the risk indicators, then you collect the data, and then you look at it every quarter or every month and see whether the risk has moved. If the risk is becoming more and more significant, then you have to probably do more action and deal with the issues at that point of time. Yeah. So I just wanted to talk about AI a bit, because now everybody talks about artificial intelligence, and everything is AI nowadays. Yeah. So life has become very, very easy, not only for us, but I think for all of us. Life has become very, very easy. And we look at how AI has helped risk management also one way or the other. So basically, if you look at AI, they can actually, see people like us, because we are consultants. So it's a bit easier for us because we do many different companies. We have data of many different companies, and we can share with you all the best practices. But if you are working for Felcra, and if your knowledge is only on Felcra for many years, you only know the best practices of Felcra, but you don't know the best practices of the other plantation companies. So where do you get the information? There's nowhere to go. But with AI nowadays, a lot of information is available. Alright, so I was looking at some of the articles. It was quite interesting. Last weekend, The Age, one of the HR companies saying that they have started using AI, and they have put all the job descriptions, from wherever around the world into the AI system that they have. And now if they want to create a job description, they just go in and say, okay, I want a job description for a sales guy within this particular industry. This is the size of the organization. Zoom, the job description comes out straight away. Tak payah, fikir, what to write, don't know what to write, this, no need already. Everything is there already. Alright? If you want to do a performance evaluation, you say, okay, what are the parameters kita nak pakai performance evaluation? You say, alright, for this particular area, this is the size of the organization, this is what I need, give me a performance evaluation form. Zoom, everything comes out. Alright? And in table form. They come out in table form. So everything has become quite easy nowadays. So you cannot say tak tahu, because everything is available. In AI, ChatGPT, Perplexity, many things. There are many AI tools that you can use to drive. And the good thing about this is because this information you have is a worldwide information. It's best practices from around the world. So you extract out the things. So when you look at risk now, so say katakan you want to have, you are the chief risk officer, you want to now move all your servers into cloud. Alright? So you want to know what the risk areas are. What are the risk areas to move all my information from my normal server system into cloud? Alright? And you want to work with the chief technology officer, your IT manager, or your IT officer to identify the risk before you start the process. You want to know what can go wrong. So you key in all these things. You key in all these things into the ChatGPT. Then you tell the ChatGPT, give me all the risk areas, plus the risk name, risk type, risk description, risk potential risk owner, then you should deal with this risk, cause, consequences. Be detailed and put it all in a table format. Then, Zoom, the thing comes out, last week. It tells you, I mean the list is much longer than this lah. I just extracted the first few. Alright? Then based on this list, they say, okay, I've got a cybersecurity risk, unauthorized access. What do I do? How do I manage this particular risk? Give me some strategies of how to address this risk. So, keluar strategy pula. So is it difficult to do risk management now? Very easy, really. You go and key in plantation, they got the risk areas of all the plantation industry already. Yeah. The day I was giving a talk to Tabung Haji. Yeah, so they wanted me specifically to talk about risk of people going, for Hajj, the pilgrims. Pilgrims going for Hajj, what is the risk areas? So I say in Malaysia, Tabung Haji is the only one which sends pilgrims. How, for me, if I've not worked with Tabung Haji, how am I to identify the risk? Alright, so I went to ChatGPT. They macam-macam. They have the risk for Egypt, the pilgrims management. What are the risk management? What are the issues that you find in pilgrim management? Egypt and all these other Middle East countries. We send pilgrims to Saudi. What are the key issues? So everything is there. We have 30 risk areas which was generated by ChatGPT for pilgrim management, to be shared with Tabung Haji. So it's no longer difficult. Semua ada in AI. Alright? So if you tell me you don't know what your risk areas are, you go to ChatGPT, they will tell you what your risk areas are. Then you work from there. Because not that we semua nak cut and paste je lah. Kita ambil dulu, then we challenge ourselves. Is there anything else that the ChatGPT has not thought about? Or is there anything else, which is not relevant for us, kita take out? Which is relevant for us? So, you want to move faster. You want to move at a faster speed. This is the way. We use AI, we move. And this all, you don't need to buy the ChatGPT. It's all free. It's all free. You want to go one step later, of course, then you can go. So these are good practices where even for us nowadays, we find that it's easy. If you want to come up with action plans normally is not that easy to come out, like how do you address, say CPO price, fluctuation of CPO price as one of your risks. How do you address that particular risk? So let's see what ChatGPT ada, how they address it. Then from there you see whether the thing is relevant in your case, and then you drive it from there. Yeah. Okay, no problems, easy. Alright, let's move on. Then you go to another AI tool called Predictive Analytics. Alright, and you say that, alright, Felpra now wants to sector, but I don't know what are the risk areas in tech sector. I don't know what is the current situation in the tech sector and so on. So katakanlah we want to buy a technology company. So you go to ChatGPT, you say, alright lah, please analyze the impact of rising interest rates and ongoing geopolitical tension on tech sector. Consider historical data and similar economic conditions. And then, based on the current economic trends, historical patterns, predict the performance of tech sector over the next 6 to 12 months. What sectors should I consider increasing exposure in order to hedge a potential downturn in the tech sector? How should we adjust our portfolio allocation? So you key it into check this thing called the predictive analytics. Soon everything will come out. It tell you next 12 months whether tech sector is the right place to be or not. And it analyze everything for you. So you want to prepare paper for the board pun senang lah. Because everything is already analyzed. You don't need to go and do research, Google, go find this, read this, read that, read this, read that. For what? Everything is there. Then you see whether it's reasonable in the context or not. Alright? Of course, we cannot take everything lock, stock and barrel lah. Kita kena fikir juga lah. Some other the input, the thing which is provided. But these guys, they analyze worldwide. Alright? They can analyze the industry worldwide and tell you exactly whether the tech sector in the next 6 to 12 months will be what it is. Alright? Or whether it will not be. So, it is good for you to know. But finally, you make the decision. The board will make the decision. But at least you have given enough input, to basically drive. So, coming back to the gentleman, question investment, what kind of investment? So, you use predictive analytics and go into ChatGPT or other tools and see what are the good investments, which are there in the market space at this point of time. And whether the current economic environment, next 6 months economic environment, this will affect this particular investment. Because as you know, investments sometimes like tech sector, today it could be this, tomorrow the whole tacting will be changing. All right? Those days, we had Sony Discman. You put a Discman, you put a disc. But now it's all iPod. So the whole industry have changed. All right? So if you are in that industry, you are done because things have changed. So similarly in this particular case. I remember JP Morgan, they decided that they wanted to invest into a nanotechnology company. Right? So they went through 200 nanotechnology companies to decide which one to invest in. They analyzed it. Finally, they decided there was one company which produced liquid crystal display, the LED screens. They produced LED screens, and they decided that they will invest into this company. By then, they invested, all right, and they were not fast enough. 6 months later, after their investment, the whole technology for the liquid display unit has changed to something else. All right, all the investment right off because old technology only 6 months later. So technology is something like this, where you have to be very careful. What technology, and if you do not know, check lah. See what is the latest technology which is coming up. Because around the world, somebody will have analyzed all this for you. You don't need to go and figure this out. So these are some of the things you look at. So alright, so that's the end of risk management. I just want to touch a bit on ESG because ESG is also a very, very important topic on environmental, social, and governance. This is big in Malaysia, and Bursa has come out with regulations on this. All listed companies now in Malaysia, they have to have disclosure on sustainability, and next year disclosure on climate change, and not simple disclosures, very, very detailed disclosures. And all the other companies which are not listed, the Malaysian government is also pushing for proper ESG management across the organizations and so on. All right, and I've talked a bit of this at the earlier presentation, the earlier one. But the issue is there's so much of reading that needs to be done on ESG. There are so many principles. There's so many reporting frameworks which has come up. So in the principles you can see, there is Sustainability Development Goals by UNDP. So United Nations Development Programme, they came out with a couple of Sustainability Development Goals, and there are many goals there, I think 24 or whatever, and you need to select which one applies to you. Then there is the PRI, the principles for PRI, then you have United Nations again, then reporting framework, you have CDP, you have CBSB, the Climate Disclosure Standards Board, you have Global Reporting Initiative, you have the Standard Accounting, Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, you have Integrated Reporting, you have TCFD, which is basically the climate change, you have Task Force for Climate Change for Financial Disclosure, you have ISSB, which is the International Sustainability Standards Board. So a lot of them. Then on the rating agency, you got macam-macam lah, S&P Global. So which one to follow? So finally, after all these things, I think they all also realized that there were too many of all these things in a complex environment. They came out and tried to merge a lot of these things. So what they did was they took the CDP, created what they call the Climate Disclosure Standards. They took the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board and Integrated Reporting, merged them into a value reporting foundation. Then they merged this with the climate disclosure and came out with the IFRS, and IFRS then established ISSB. So ISSB is the International Sustainability Standards Board. Alright? Then from there, they also take what is in the Task Force for Climate Change. They influence, whatever influence, all this comes under ISSB. So in Malaysia now, we have the ISSB, which Bursa drives the whole process through the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, who then drives the standards for sustainability, and of course climate change. Then of course there are a few regulatory organizations, the European Union and so on, which also then there are certain follow-up articles that you can read up, from there in terms of what to do and how to do it. But in Malaysia, you find Bursa, they basically drive the process. Alright, you have Bursa, you have got SC, you have Bank Negara Malaysia. Alright, and Bank Negara is very much on the top of this. because they have instructed all the banks that loans going out nowadays, all the loans which are going out, the loans, must support environmentally good projects. If they are not environmentally good projects, doesn't support the environment, they have to reconsider whether to give the loan. All right, and secondly, whether you find the rates of interest. All right, that's why you find that going forward, companies like Petronas, they are going to have a lot of problems in getting loans. Number one, number two, even to raise funds, raise bonds and all these things, is going to be a challenge in the years to come. Why? Because their projects are all mostly not environment friendly, because oil and gas. Alright, whereas some of the other companies, like for example, you look at Yinson, one of the Malaysian company where EPF and QAP has got a lot of investment in Yinson, and they just announced yesterday that they managed to raise a $1 billion bond. They are also into oil and gas, but they are into FPSO, that means the floating storage and so on. But they have gone into renewable energy projects in Brazil, and they have many other renewal. So they are getting all these credits from the renewal projects to fund, the oil and gas thing. So the people are still willing to fund them because they are able to show that they are also moving towards the renewable energy projects. So similarly, Petronas may also have to do that. So this is where you find that Bank Negara is coming out, and not only Bank Negara, around the world, the fund managers before they invest, like I told you earlier this morning, they want to do an ESG due diligence. Whether you meet the due diligence, then only they fund you. Yeah, so similarly. So then, of course, mandatory for Bursa listing companies, we talked about this, and there is only one consistent ESG framework, which is the ISSB S1, S2, standard 1 and standard 2. And then you have many other things, the corporate social responsibility framework, the revised accessibility SRI roadmap, Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance. Even in the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance, the 2021 they changed 5 clauses within the Code of Corporate Governance, and those 5 clauses are dedicated to sustainability. They want all the board of directors of listed companies, they must have knowledge, and expertise in sustainability, ESG. They must have that understanding. They must have a sustainability officer. All that has to now be included in the Malaysian Code of Corporate Governance. Then moving on from there, what are the ESG risks? So ESG risks can be divided into a few: environmental, social, and of course governance. So there are a few things that you can look at, and from there you look at environmental, you look at things like water security usage, deforestation, loss of biodiversity, pollution, prevention, control. So all these risk areas, so if you look at Felcra, and we say that, all right, what are the environment issues that we may have at Felcra, which may affect Felcra? So things like, for example, in the mills, once we have produced the CPO, all the waste, how do we treat the waste? Do we dump it into the ground, and hoping, in the future sunflower will be affected? How do we deal with that? And then the EFB we have, what do we do with that? When we take from the plantation, we take out all the fruits, the bunch which is left, what do we do with the bunch? So all these are things which can affect the whole, and before we go into a new plantation, what do we do? Or do we cut a jungle to plant oil palm trees? So all these things comes under the issue of environmental, and how do we deal with it? So the whole thing about pollution, prevention, control, water security usage, you find that those days in Malaysia, as you know that our water generally comes from the rivers. Alright? So basically those days, 20 years ago, the rivers water all was super clean. Now you go to a river, you look at the river, the water is dark brown in color. But we still tap from that to process the water into water treatment, and then it comes to your house, you drink the water. Alright? But you actually see the source of water, I don't think so you will drink the water. Yeah? But that's how, because of the pollution, the water from white, have now come to brown, dark brown color. Yeah? Because of all the industry changes and all. So these are the things they say that the future, you need to deal with the environmental issues, and therefore, some of these things need to be dealt with. Of course, social, we talk about diversity, inclusion, alright? And Malaysia, if you look at Malaysia, we are, whatever state they've done, I bring to around 70 countries around the world. And let me tell you, there is no other country better than Malaysia. Yeah, Malaysia is still the best. Why? Because of diversity. You know, we have all the diversity, and our strength is in our diversity. And we can drive the country, you know, to a different level. You know, if we do not have, you know, hopefully our political situation remains stable the next few years, we will be very, very far ahead. In fact, somebody was asking me about, you know, what's the structure of governance, risk management in the other ASEAN countries. We are far ahead of many of the ASEAN countries besides Singapore. In fact, Singapore also, when we introduced the Code of Corporate Governance, we introduced first. Singapore came 1 year later, but they all took us. Yeah? But the rest of it, Thailand, Indonesia, Cambodia, Laos, they are far. They don't talk about risk management or governance, and ESG is not existence in all these places. Yeah? So we are ahead a lot of these countries. So diversity is important. Human rights, I think now human rights are becoming more and more important. Workplace safe condition, community engagement. I think especially for your Velcro, because you have got the CSR objective. You know, you have all the small holders, you know, and how to get them, you know, to train them, how to manage, you know, their plantation well. So that is an objective, whether we like it or not, it's a social thing that we need to do, you know, so that they can all participate, you know, as part and parcel, you know, of the country's, you know, economic, you know, environment where we improve. They also comes together. So the community engagement is very, very critical as part of your social. So I think this one you all will score very high marks because you already have your CSR going on all this community engagement. Of course, governance talks about ethics. It talks about the board principles, the board activities, tax compliance, local global standards requirement, and then talks about corruption. All right, corruption I think is a big thing in Malaysia. Malaysia, we were very good 20 years ago. Corruption was not as high. Then, you know, we were at the peak of corruption in 2017, 2018, you know, when the 1MDB issue came out. So we were like number 40 in the world, you know, in terms of being how good we are in the corruption. From there, we became number 61, you know, and our score was 45 over 100. We failed. Yeah, but the last 2 years, we have now improved. We are now down to, score has gone to 51, which is good, we have passed. Yeah, and we have now, I think we are number 47 or 48 in the world back, you know, which is good. That means there are activities. Yeah, the top 2-3 countries are people like Norway, the Scandinavian countries, Singapore, and so on. Singapore used to be number 1 also last time together with Norway and all. But I think they learned from us, then after that they also moved to number 3 already, you know, because a lot of corruption crept into Singapore. You know, you ask them, they say, oh, that must be the Malaysians. Yeah, but actually they also are in the same situation. Yeah. So corruption is a very, very important thing, and you know, I'm glad to see that you have got an integrity officer, you know, from MECC in your organization, which is good because, you know, they help, you know, they're not here to catch you. They are here to improve the processes. You know, they're here to help you to build up, you know, good processes so that we can manage the organization much better. And then, of course, you have anti-competitive behavior, grievances procedures. All these are part of the G part. Then other things like environmental risk, physical risk, supply chain, sea level rising. And also, if you look at, you know, some of the countries like Maldives, if you need to visit, you better visit. I think 20 years time down the line, I don't think so there'll be Maldives, because as the water rise, the Maldives will go underwater eventually. Yeah, because they're all islands, you know, in the middle of the sea. So you can see the water is rising because, you know, of climate change, and that can affect, you know, the overall organization. And then transition risk, looking at structural changes in the supply, products, services, and all. Social non-compliance labor standards, inadequate payment of labor, lack of assurance of industrial standards, and then governance risks, you know, compliance with tax laws, and so on. Yeah. So I think pretty much as we look at the emerging trends, there are a couple of emerging trends: risk of greenwashing liability, then sustainability reporting growth, and of course greater focus on ESG due diligence, which we talk about. Yeah, so in the future, when you buy a company, I think you also need to consider, besides doing the normal financial due diligence, also do an ESG due diligence, because you don't want to end up with a company where you find they have failed in all the ESG, because then it becomes your problem to deal with the ESG issues in that particular organization. So currently the trend is when people do buy organization, they invest, they look at, better do an ESG high-level due diligence to see whether there is some compliance on the ESG part or not. If not, then they work on from there. So, and the emerging trends, like I mentioned, banks are reducing their financing, imposing higher rates for non-ESG projects. Banks are even rejecting a lot of loans. And like I said, if you're in the oil and gas industry, not easy to get loans and not easy to get funding. Because they see that as a ESG aligned project. And even if you look at all the fund managers, they are looking towards that. Of course, Malaysian government, our commitment, is to go with carbon neutrality in 2050. 2050, although it's far away, but actually it's not very far. If we don't start now, we will never be able to achieve this particular thing. So we need to deal with that. And key stakeholders are requesting for higher ESG application. So whether you like it or not, this is not just for listed companies. Every company in Malaysia has to move towards neutrality in carbon emission. So everybody has to work. And of course, not easy because there is different scopes. Scope 1 is the ones that you can manage yourself. That means whatever you produce, whatever which affects the environment, are there ways that you can improve it? So your meal, the ways that you do, is there a way to manage that? So which is within your control. Scope 2 is more in terms of indirectly, you can control it, but to a certain extent. But scope 3 is the worst one, where you're selling your products to a third party, and whether the third party is managing the environment well, using your product. If they're using your product and making the environment worse, then you are also affected because that comes under scope. And not much you can do because you already sold, but you cannot be selling to a party which is going to affect the environment. So that comes under scope 3. So a lot of things that needs to be done, in order for the government to reach to the neutrality of carbon emission by 2050. And the key stakeholders are requesting for higher ESG application standards, low tolerance for poor ESG practices, and shareholders, investors are demanding more, and they want to see better ESG practices application. And of course, the government, business regulatory bodies are introducing more laws and regulation. So now you find that if you want to go for listing in Bursa, they will interview the directors to find out whether you have knowledge of ESG or not. If you don't train the directors on ESG, they may not take you for listing. They may not approve your listing. So a lot of emphasis on ESG by Bursa now, because they want to train companies to move towards that particular direction itself. So finally, the Task Force on Climate-Related Disclosure, the TCFD. So they just talk about the risk management part. I just want to talk about risk management part. Disclose how the company identifies, access, and manages climate-related risks. And then from there, describe the company processes identifying and assessing the climate-related risks. And then you describe the company processes of managing climate-related risks. And then, and the whole process of identifying and so on. So this is part. So Malaysia, we look at the standards S1, S2, and we also look at TCFD, as part of our ESG concept that we have within Malaysia. Yeah. So this is another big topic. I can spend another whole day talking about ESG, but I thought just address some of the risk areas that you may have within ESG. And normally when you do risk management, you don't just look, you look, of course, focus is on strategic risks. And then you look at the operational risks and all other risks. You also need to look at ESG risks. But at the same time, you also need to look at the corruption risk. All right, as you know that in Malaysia, MACC introduced Section 17 capital A. Under Section 17 capital A, there are 8 principles or 8 policies there, which every company in Malaysia needs to apply. All right, and one of them talks about corruption risk assessment. So as part of doing risk management, I think it's easier for you to also incorporate corruption risk assessment. Areas where you think there could be corruption within the organization, what are the risk areas, and what are the action plans you have or current controls you have to manage that particular areas. And if there's something which is very serious, maybe it may become strategic and maybe then it needs to get reported up to the board. So you combine the current risk management process, get ESG risk also being incorporated, and get the corruption risk also to be incorporated. Yeah. Of course, as you know, Section 17A, although I think it's not fully tested in Malaysia yet, although we had 1 or 2 cases, but it is quite scary. Yeah, because from a perspective, that if they find that the organization, somebody in the organization has given a bribe, to a third party, that person, if get caught, he will go to jail, and then the supervisor, the directors, everybody will be implicated. Unless you can prove that you have adequate procedures, and then you need to show whether you have put in the adequate procedures. And I'm sure under Feltra you will have done all these things, and so on, just to keep you, in place. Even Maybank is one of the first Malaysian companies which have gone and established Scope 3. Scope 3 is not easy because Scope 3 is the third party using your product. How do you make sure that they use the money? So like when Maybank gives a loan to a third party, how do you make sure that the third party uses it, for environment-friendly, investment, not for non-environment friendly. So they have now moved into Scope 3, and they are looking at the baseline, how to share, and how to put a report together, and part of their disclosure. All right? So with that, I think that's all that I really wanted to share with you, and if there's any questions you have, I'll be happy to take the questions now. So I just want to thank you, and of course also thank Arim. Arim is the Academy of Risk Management Malaysia. I'm on the board in Academy of Risk Management Malaysia. So this academy is a non-for-profit, and we basically set it up to help generally the risk managers and other people within the industry, to get themselves certified. So we have a certified risk management program which we run level 1, level 2. Level 1 is for any graduate, so it's a post-qualified, and level 2 is more for people who have got risk management experience to become a certified risk manager. And the idea is we promote these things so that people can learn, understand, and get themselves certified so that they can advise the organization much better in terms of risk management. So we have a team, or a few of us, from Telecom Malaysia's Chief Risk Officer, SP Setia Chief Risk Officer, FGV's Chief Risk Officer, and all. We are all part of the board, and we are promoting this, as part of our CSR, to make more people in Malaysia, to appreciate risk. Because if we appreciate risk much better, we can manage the organizations much better, and we can drive, to the next level. So that's what, we do at ARIM, which is the Academy of Risk Management Malaysia. So with that, thank you very much, and I pass it back to our MC for today. Thank you.
Terima kasih kepada yang berbahagia, yang berusaha Encik Ranjit. Kita buka ruang untuk sekiranya ada di kalangan para peserta yang ingin bertanyakan apa-apa soalan, boleh terus ke dua mic yang kita sediakan di celah-celah tempat duduk kita pada hari ini. Kalau ada apa-apa soalan yang diajukan. Baik, terima kasih sekali lagi kepada yang berusaha Encik Ranjit Singh atas kupasan yang sangat bermanfaat dan buka perspektif baru kepada kita semua. Seterusnya, majlis menjemput yang berbahagia Datuk Seri Ahmad Jazlan bin Yaakob, Pengurusi Perkara Berhad, diiringi oleh yang berbahagia Datuk Idris bin Lasif, Ketua Pegawai Eksekutif Perkara Berhad, untuk tampil ke atas pentas bagi menyampaikan pak penghargaan kepada penceramah pada hari ini, Encik Ranjit. Terima kasih kepada yang berbahagia Datuk Pengurusi dan juga Datuk CEO atas kesudian menyempurnakan penyampaian sebentar tadi. Seterusnya Datuk Seri dan juga Datuk CEO dijemput terus ke meja jamuan. Hadirin sekalian, kita akan berehat untuk jamuan makan tengah hari di ruangan lantai biru. Majlis akan bersambung semula pada jam 2 petang untuk sesi ceramah yang kedua dengan topik yang tidak kurang menariknya. Nantikan. Sekian, kita tangguhkan majlis kita. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.